Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Heel, and I am the Director of HR Technology and Consulting for Diversified Employer Solutions. Thank you for joining us today for exploring ThinkHR Comply and Live webinar. This is the last webinar of our three-part ThinkHR series. Diversified Employer Solutions has partnered with ThinkHR to provide you with tools and resources that will help you solve your HR challenges at no cost to you. Before I turn the presentation over to our speaker, Laura Holland from ThinkHR, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items with you. First, everyone is currently muted in listen-only mode for this webinar. This will keep the webinar moving along and keep us to our designated time frame. However, we do have time reserved at the end of the presentation for questions. If you have a question throughout the webinar, feel free to type it in the box along the right-hand side of the screen. Laura will answer questions at the end of the presentation. Now I'd like to turn the microphone over to today's presenter, Laura Holland from ThinkHR. Laura is a Partner Success Manager and has worked with employee benefits and HR technology for nearly 5 years. For those of you that have been on the first two series, Laura will be rejoining us and you will be familiar with her already. So Laura, I'll give it to you to begin your presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Beth. So yes, today we are on our third and final presentation of our series here. But just to kick things off or give you an idea of what we're talking about, as Beth mentioned, we're talking about two of the ThinkHR solutions. We're isolating Comply and Live. So I wanted to kick things off here today. If you can see my screen, I do have our large overview slide up to give you an idea of the whole suite of ThinkHR solutions. But as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about this top one, ThinkHR Live, or the hotline, as well as ThinkHR Comply, or our resource library. So if you did miss the other, or one of the other presentations that we've done, or both of them, we did go into Learn and Insight in a little bit more detail. So if you have any questions, let Diversified or myself know, and we can talk about that in a little bit more detail, as I mentioned. So to talk about ThinkHR Live and ThinkHR Comply, you know, I like to provide a really good idea of what these solutions look like. So I'll spend a little time on this slide before I turn it over. But again, you know, ThinkHR Live, our hotline, a lot of times that is how you are first introduced to the ThinkHR services. To review some of the features of the hotline itself, we do provide real-time advice and answers from live HR experts. So our nearly 20 advisors are located in Northern California, and they are available for 11 hours each day to work on answering questions, providing insight, you know, throwing ideas back and forth with whoever might consult with them. But those hours, those 11 hours a day, I like to review those. Those are from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time. So for anyone taking notes, again, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time. Those are the hours of the day that you can expect to receive the live response or response to your online submitted question from our hotline team. A little bit of review about this hotline team. Again, there are nearly 20 of these individuals located here in the U.S. Over on the West Coast. And each of these advisors has you know, a number of years of experience actually working in HR in some capacity, whether it be small companies, large companies, public, private, I mean, across the board altogether. We have a lot of great experience on this team. All of them are PHR or SPHR certified, so you can be sure that they have the right advice and the right insight to be able to share. And we also do strive for a same-day answer rate of 100%, but sometimes there are some complicated questions that might require a little bit of additional time. So we do strive for that response within 24 hours, absolutely. I did mention this before, but online submission, or you can call the number, and I'll go through that in the portal in just a second. But that's a great idea of ThinkHR Live if you really haven't heard of the solution before, or perhaps review if you've already joined us for this series. And then the second piece, down here on the left, ThinkHR Comply, or what I refer to as our reference library or resource library. It is a searchable library where you can type in any questions that you have or specific search terms to find additional information about, whatever you're working on. So within that, we also have some additional features, or what I refer to as, tools or builders or something to help you be proactive. And those include things like a Q&A database, forms, documents, being able to search for specific kinds of materials, also tools and checklists, and of course something I'll talk a little bit more about here too, but we even have a builder for employee handbooks, which is state specific. So likely you've heard me talk about that before, but I like to give an idea of which resources we're isolating here today. So before I go into a live demonstration and poke around in the site a little bit, I did want to, let's see here, make sure this works. Again, I went through this already, but the comply and the learned features. But again, before I go through the live demonstration, I wanted to isolate some of the very popular types of hotline questions we get. So if we were to look across the board of all clients and brokers who are asking questions of ThinkHR, if we had to put those in some categories, what would that look like? So I did a brief search here, and the number one category of questions that we do get is obviously about employee benefits. This is I would say a pretty general category, but a lot of the information here has to do with, the administration of employee benefits, any questions about administering that, but also it's kind of like I said, a holding category for any administration questions that there might be. The next piece, without surprise, is going to be compliance. Especially recently, we've been flooded with questions about compliance, especially ACA. But we get a lot of questions which do tie into our training courses too. How can I help keep my employees aware of certain information, or how can I educate my employees? Oftentimes, yes, we do have training programs for this, but additionally, we get a lot of questions about specific, ways to be compliant without getting into too much detail there. I'll put the last three up here as well, but number 3 is employee management. And to give you an idea of what employee management really means, it's questions about that might come from internal. Questions about employees interacting with other employees. Maybe there are some issues there. Maybe there are new managers. Maybe somebody's calling in to ask for some recommendations on training new managers. So employee management, again, another broad category, but a lot of questions do come in regarding interactions of employees and supervisors and employees with each other as well. And then I'm going to lump the 4th and the 5th here together, but terminations is not surprising. It is very high on our list. We get a lot of similar questions about terminations, about recommendations on how to do them, asking for a little insight on if a termination in a certain case might be appropriate. Our hotline team will answer those to the extent that they can, given that there isn't any legal advice needed to be given there. But also recruiting and hiring. A lot of companies are growing at the moment, and one constant theme I know that many employers are dealing with at the moment is trying to find the right staff and the right fit. And our hotline team is very ready to give some insight about recommendations on recruiting and hiring, or being able to advise on some strategies to be able to do that. The one thing that I thought was very cool looking through this list was that it looked quite similar to the way the diversified clients categories rank as well. So I'll just pull that up here on our next slide. As you can see, compliance is number 1 here, which is really not a surprise. pretty closely across the board, compliance will rank in the top 5, if not the top 3, for a number of different brokers' clients. Compensation is up there, absolutely. Questions about compensating correctly, discussing compensation, everything like that. Employee management, again, ranked number 3, just like the list here at ThinkHR. Employee benefits, kind of a general category, but I often see it in the top 5, obviously. And then recruiting and hiring. Not really surprised to see this in the top 5. I would think that some of the common themes we see across the board are similar for diversified clients as well. What can you be doing to attract talent and maintain talent, and making sure hiring practices are, in place, and recruiting practices as well. So by comparing those 2 lists, there aren't any surprises there, but I do think that this is a great representation of diversified clients using the hotline resources as well. If I saw some category that was very unique in the top 5, that would be surprising, but I think that these are, this is a nice trend to see for all the clients here. All right, so I'm going to escape out of this. I'm going to go through, just spend a little bit of time in our portal here to talk about ThinkHR Live and some of those questions specifically, just before I get to comply things. But as review, on the Diversified website is your login. Your email is going to be your username, and it does prompt you for the email as well as your password. I've already logged into a demo Diversified account today, so I already have that set up. But just as a reminder here, there are 2 ways to be able to answer a question by our hotline team. The first, obviously, is to call in. The number is listed here on this page. And the second way would be to type in your question and all of its details right here. So I know I can't encourage you enough to be, be ready to call in with a question, but if anyone on the call here has not asked a question or had a conversation with our hotline team, this is a great time to do it. Recently I had a discussion about the hotline team with a client, and I got some feedback from their experience as well. So sometimes people think that you only have to call in to the hotline if you have an explicit question, if you are you need to know yes or no to something. And that's not always the case. A lot of times for smaller HR departments at companies, it can be very helpful to have a second opinion about things. If you have a project in front of you or kind of an issue in front of you and you just want to run it by someone, that's something that they do too. They'll contribute some ideas to help you along. So if you are the only HR representative at the company, I encourage you to call in and ask for a little bit of advice, a little bit of thought sharing with that aspect. All right, so one other piece that I'd like to show to you, as well as it serves as a transition to our second piece here, but comply. Comply is this first dot here. I mentioned it as a resource library. I have it already open in a tab. But since we were talking about hotline questions, this transitioned very well. If I scroll down here to our first dot on the left within comply, we're looking at our Q&A database. So if you need even more examples of questions, or you're very curious about what kinds of questions people are asking, this is a really great place to start searching. One thing I like to highlight, the most viewed questions, these do change periodically, but I'll have to tell you this one here at the top about terminations has been there a long time. It is obviously the most viewed question, and it has been for a very long time. So, but if you're wondering, what kind of questions are people asking, how specific are they, how general are they, you know what, come in here and go ahead and type in a question or a search term and do a quick search to see what people are asking. The only thing I do say about the Q&A library, although I love it, if you have a question that is slightly different than one you're looking at, you look up a general question, but your version of that question in your instance is a little bit more specific, or there's some other details related. Don't be afraid to call the hotline. The questions here are, again, to serve as examples, but make sure you get that custom response, especially if your situation differs from the question that's listed in the portal. All right, so I will go back here, and we'll stay around in Comply for just a little bit. Just wait for my page to catch up. There we go. So as I reviewed in my original overview, the top portion here, it does serve as a very quick way to be able to search for some information. I trust that everyone on the call here has done a search before, so I won't go too far into that. But the piece that I find myself talking about more and more are actually the tools at the bottom of this page. So it's this section right here. Specifically, I talk a great deal about the Employee Handbook Builder. A lot of people have questions about it. Hey, Laura, how does it work? Does it take very long to be able to do this? Those kinds of questions. So I'll let my page update here. But if the handbook is something that you haven't, poked around with or investigated a little bit, this is very easy to do. So there are very clear steps on how you go ahead and create a handbook builder. I would just start now if I'm going in to create one, or one that I already had saved. I could go ahead and resume that. But the way it works is it takes you through section by section. It lets you customize certain areas, but it also provides information for your state in areas where that should be provided. So if you need additional information about having a handbook, there's a section on that here. I often show this page as well to give you an idea of what that looks like. So section by section, ultimately it's up to whoever's creating it to pick and choose. Maybe you want all the sections, maybe you just want a few of those, but very easy to be able to do. And if you don't take my word for it, there is a how-to video to help you guide through those sections as well. So the handbook builder is increasingly popular ever since we have made it state-specific. So that's something I highly recommend checking out. The other piece I like to talk about down here, which I think often gets overlooked, but a job description builder. A lot of times, if you're hiring for a position, it could be, if you really think about it, it could be years since that job description may have had a critical look at it. So job description builders will encourage you to reinvestigate the job descriptions you have already available. Make sure that all the pieces of information in there are going to be held true, that all responsibilities are going to be disclosed, and really I'll let you provide some company information for that job description as well, especially if you're advertising on some sites. Making sure that's updated is something where you can take action very quickly by posting. So job description is something I really like to talk about. So those, I would say, are the three areas that are most popular. But obviously the healthcare reform section is going to be a huge piece as well. So with that said, I will go back to my PowerPoint presentation here because I do want to give you an idea about what diversified clients are looking at within Comply. I also thought that was very interesting. There we go. So no surprise there. Number one is a handbook builder. At least you guys are curious about it, which is great. Sample forms and policies, oftentimes those come up when you do a search. They isolate the forms and policies, which is great. Very easy to identify those. Wage and hour, safety and health, some very popular categories here. Performance reviews, that's a great area as well. I know our hotline team fields a lot of questions about performance reviews. Exempt, non-exempt, that will help, or there's a section in our Comply for classifying employees that can help with exempt versus non-exempt, FMLA, staffing, and discrimination. So these are all very popular categories, and I like to see a variety of them up here. It means that a lot of different clients are searching in Comply. So let's see here. I'm going to go back to my main page here and take a look to see if we have any questions at this point. I know today's session is going to be a little bit shorter than the 45 minutes of the other ones, but I just want to make sure we're making good use of time here. So one last thing I would like to mention, and it's related to asking questions of our live team, or the hotline questions. I did have a conversation with Diversified about, whether, if you get a response from the hotline team and you get a pretty basic response, if you need additional insight, Diversified is absolutely available to help with that, which is great. So a lot of times if you feel like you get a response and it's very straightforward and it's helpful, but you want to do something with it or create something with that answer, just know that Diversified does have access to additional resources to be able to help you with some of those situations. All right, so it doesn't look like there are questions at this point, which is okay. I know we've covered a lot of this material throughout the series quite a bit, but absolutely, if there are any additional questions, feel free to follow up with Diversified or have them contact me. I'd be more than happy to get you a response for anything you're wondering about.
Laura, we do have one question. I'm hoping
Sure.
that you can answer it. It has to do with the handbook builder. The question is, does the number of employees when creating a handbook need to be specific, or are you just trying to determine if it is an employer that has more than 50 people?
That is a very good question. So before I commit myself to an answer on that, I am going to check so I can get an answer for you, Beth. I believe it is the second answer to understand if it's considered a small employer or large, but let me get an ultimate answer to that question for you, and I'll send you a message. Does that work?
That's fine, yes.
Okay.
And we don't have any other questions at the time. So now that Laura has walked us through ThinkHR, the Comply and Live, we hope that you have gained a better understanding of what ThinkHR can offer you and how you can take advantage of this resource that's available to you and others in your organization. We will be sending a recording of this webinar as well as the questions that were asked during this presentation. We will provide an answer in the next few days to the question that was asked on the handbook. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.